The city was alive with the sound of rain. It pounded against the windows, ran down the glass in messy streaks, and rattled the roof of the apartment like a drum. Thunder rolled in the distance, loud and frightening, making the walls shake slightly. Inside his small apartment, a man sat quietly on his couch, wrapped in a blanket. He liked storms, usually. There was something peaceful about watching rain fall from the safety of indoors, sipping warm tea, and listening to the rhythm outside. But tonight was different. Tonight, the storm felt heavy, almost alive. And there was a tension in the air that made his skin crawl. He had been living alone for years, enjoying the simplicity of his life. His apartment was modest, filled with books stacked neatly on shelves. There's a small collection of plants on the windowsill and a few paintings on the walls. He liked routine, liked quiet, and liked the fact that his life was predictable. But as the storm intensified, a sudden, loud crash of thunder made him flinch. At the same moment, there was a faint but urgent knocking on his door. At first, he thought it was someone joking or a neighbor needing help, but the knocking was different. It was hesitant yet desperate, small but insistent, as if someone was trapped outside in fear. He put down his tea, careful not to spill it, and walked toward the door. Each step felt heavier as another crash of thunder shook the building. His heart raced not with fear, but with the strange sense that something unusual was happening. When he opened the door, he froze. Standing there was a young woman drenched from head to toe. Her clothes clung to her body, soaked through by the rain. Water dripped from her hair in long, shiny strands that stuck to her pale face. She shivered violently, hugging herself as though the cold could somehow be kept out. But it wasn't just the rain that made him pause. There was something unusual about her, something magical, though he couldn't explain it. Her eyes were wide, golden with a strange glow in the dim light of the hallway, and her ears slightly pointed and covered in soft fur, peeked out from her wet hair. He blinked, thinking his mind might be playing tricks. But no, she was real. "Please, can I come in?" she whispered, her voice trembling, small and fragile. The man hesitated. He had never seen anything like her before. He didn't understand how she had appeared at his door, or why, or even what she was. A part of him screamed caution. What if she was dangerous? But another part, the part that had always felt compassion for the vulnerable, urged him to help. He could not leave her out there in the storm. "Come inside," he said, stepping aside. "Quickly, before you catch cold." She entered without another word, shaking like a leaf in the wind. The instant she stepped into the apartment, he noticed how small and delicate she seemed. Her clothes were plastered to her skin, revealing that she had no place to dry off. Her feet were bare, and mud from the streets clung to her toes and heels. He grabbed a towel from the bathroom, hurried back, and gently handed it to her. "Here, wrap yourself in this," he said. "I'll get you something dry to wear." She took the towel with hands that were trembling and wet, wrapping it around her body like it was a lifeline. She looked up at him briefly, eyes wide, then quickly looked away, ashamed. It was clear she wasn't used to kindness, wasn't used to someone just helping without asking questions. The man led her to the living room and set a chair near the heater. He ran to his bedroom and found a pair of sweatpants and a soft hoodie. They were large, but she would be able to wear them. When he returned, he noticed that she had curled into herself on the chair, her knees drawn up to her chest, still shaking from the cold. Her golden eyes flicked to him briefly as he handed her the clothes. "Here," he said softly. "Put these on. You'll feel warmer." She nodded silently and disappeared into the small bathroom. The sound of water running filled the apartment as she changed. He couldn't help but feel a strange mix of curiosity and concern. He had no idea what she was, why she had fox-like ears, or why her presence felt so unusual, but he knew one thing clearly. She needed help, and he was the only one who could give it right now. When she emerged, the man noticed she was slightly taller than he had first thought, though still small and delicate. Her hair, now damp but arranged neatly, fell around her shoulders like dark silk. She was still shivering, and without thinking, he handed her a mug of warm tea. She accepted it, holding it close to her chest, and took small, careful sips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice quiet but sincere. I didn't know where else to go." "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You were out in the storm. Anyone would have done the same." She hesitated, then nodded, letting the warmth of the tea seep into her body. The storm outside continued, loud and relentless. The man could hear the wind howling between buildings, the rain hitting the windows in hard, uneven bursts. And through it all, he noticed her trembling whenever a particularly loud clap of thunder sounded. She hugged herself tighter, flinching as if the sound might break her apart. Without thinking, he gestured toward the couch. "Come here. Sit down. You'll be safer." She moved slowly, as if unsure of her surroundings, and perched on the edge of the couch. The man sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. Another loud thunderclap shook the apartment, and she flinched violently. Before he could stop himself, he gently rested a hand on her back. She froze for a moment, then leaned into him slightly, seeking comfort. Her trust was fragile, but it was there, raw and honest. Hours passed like this. He tried to make small talk, asking her questions, but she mostly listened, speaking only when necessary. She seemed exhausted, not just from the storm, but from something deeper, something heavy she had carried for a long time. The man didn't press. He knew some things had to be shared in their own time. For now, it was enough that she was safe, warm, and no longer out in the cold. A terrifying night. Eventually, the storm began to ease slightly. Rain still fell, but not as violently. Thunder was softer, rolling and distant. The man noticed her eyes growing heavy, her breathing slowing. She was asleep, almost without warning, leaning against him on the couch. Her head rested lightly on his shoulder, her small frame fitting perfectly against his body. He was careful not to move, afraid she might wake and feel frightened again. For the first time that night, the apartment felt completely still. Except for the gentle patter of rain outside, he realized in that quiet moment that his life had changed forever. He had woken up to a storm, thinking it was just another rainy night. But now, with a strange girl resting against him, he understood that life could be unpredictable, surprising, and even magical. He didn't know who she was, where she had come from, or what the future held. But he knew that for this night, at least, he had someone to care for. And someone who trusted him completely. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a strange warmth in his chest, not from the fire or the tea, but from the quiet connection forming between them. Outside, the storm continued, but inside the apartment, there was a fragile peace. He stayed awake long after she had fallen asleep, watching the rain, listening to her gentle breathing, and wondering how one night could turn his ordinary life into something extraordinary. The morning came slowly, soft and gray. Rain still fell outside, though now it was light, almost gentle, tapping against the windows like tiny fingers. The city seemed quieter than usual, muted by the wet streets and overcast sky. Inside his apartment, the man was already awake, quietly moving around so as not to disturb the fox girl who had stayed with him through the night. She lay curled on the couch, still wrapped in the oversized hoodie he had given her, her breathing steady and calm. The sight of her, sleeping peacefully after the terror of the previous night, made something stir deep inside him, a mixture of relief, wonder, and a strange protective instinct he could not fully explain. He had expected her to wake up and be cautious, even frightened, but she remained in the same position. As if the night's events had finally exhausted her, he remembered how fragile she had seemed when she first arrived, her clothes soaked, her teeth chattering, her golden eyes wide with fear. And now, after a night of safety, she looked almost human in her serenity, the fox-like features softened by sleep. Her ears twitched slightly as if reacting to the faint sounds of the rain. But she did not wake. The man carefully went to the kitchen, making tea and toast for himself, all the while thinking about what had happened. He had no idea who she was or where she came from. Something about her seemed almost magical, yet utterly real. He remembered the pleading look in her eyes at the door, the way she had shivered uncontrollably during the thunder, and how she had leaned on him without hesitation. He couldn't explain why she trusted him so quickly, why she felt safe in his apartment, or why her presence brought a strange warmth to his chest. But he knew one thing. He wanted to help her, in any way he could. After finishing his tea, he returned to the living room, thinking she might have woken up. To his surprise, she was still asleep. Her small body curled on the couch like a delicate creature protecting itself from the world. He sat nearby, careful to stay silent, and watched her. Each time her ears twitched or her fingers moved slightly, he felt a protective instinct grow stronger. He wanted to understand her, to help her overcome whatever fear had driven her to seek refuge at his door. Eventually, soft light from the window began to filter through the curtains, and she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, golden and cautious, meeting his gaze with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. She yawned, stretching slightly, and then hugged herself as she sat up. "Good morning," he said softly. "Did you sleep well?" She hesitated before answering, her voice quiet but clear. I think so." "Thank you for letting me stay." "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "You were caught in the storm. Anyone would have done the same." She nodded, still keeping her gaze low, as if unsure how to behave. She seemed shy, hesitant to fully open up, but her trust was growing. The way she held herself showed that she had experienced fear and rejection before, and it would take time for her to feel safe completely. Over the next few hours, he tried to make her comfortable. He showed her where the bathroom was, offered her a towel to dry off further, and even suggested she try the soft blanket on the couch. She accepted each small gesture quietly, and he could see the gradual easing of tension in her shoulders and face. Each time she relaxed slightly, he felt a sense of hope. Perhaps she could find some peace here. As the morning passed, he noticed her reaction to the rain outside. Even now, when the storm had softened, she flinched at every crash of distant thunder. Her small body shivered, and her golden eyes widened with fear. Without thinking, he gently reached out his hand. She paused, then hesitated, before letting him place it lightly on her back. She leaned into his touch, a fragile display of trust, and for a moment, the world outside, the rain, the thunder, the storms seemed to disappear. "Do you always get this scared of storms?" he asked carefully, not wanting to push her. She nodded slowly. "Yes. Ever since I was little, thunder, lightning, they scare me. I never liked being outside when it rained." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, as if speaking louder might bring the storm closer to her. He could see how deep her fear went. It wasn't just a normal dislike of rain. It was a fear rooted in her past, a kind of memory that clung to her like a shadow. And he realized that he needed to be patient. He couldn't force her to feel safe. He could only provide a place where she might eventually trust that storms would not always bring danger. Hours turned into afternoon, and the rain continued lightly. The man tried to distract her gently, offering small tasks like watering the plants or helping him organize books. She accepted, moving cautiously, but gradually gaining a sense of ease. She asked questions quietly, curious about the apartment and its objects, and he answered patiently. The simple act of sharing information, of teaching her small things about his world, seemed to help her relax. Eventually, the conversation turned to her past, though she was hesitant to speak. I have always moved a lot," she admitted quietly. "Whenever storms came, I had to hide. People. They didn't understand. They were afraid." Her voice faltered, and she looked down, hugging herself tighter. He listened without interrupting, letting her speak at her own pace. Each word gave him a glimpse into the life she had lived. One of fear, of constant movement, of never feeling safe. He could see why she had come to his apartment that night. It wasn't just the storm. It was a search for refuge, a place where she could finally feel protected, if only for a few hours. As the afternoon faded, the rain lightened to a soft drizzle. The fox girl remained close to him, sitting on the couch with her legs tucked under her. Every time a distant rumble of thunder sounded, she instinctively leaned into him, seeking comfort in the steady presence of someone who did not judge or fear her. He realized that the simple act of letting her rest on his chest the previous night had become a pattern. She needed reassurance, a safe point in the chaos of the storm. And he was the one providing it. It was a strange new bond forming between them. he had never experienced anything like it. Here was someone who was not just fragile in body, but in spirit a person who had endured fear and isolation for as long as she could remember. And yet, she trusted him enough to let herself lean on him, to allow herself to be comforted. Even though the world outside remained unpredictable and loud, as evening approached, he made dinner for both of them. She helped minimally, careful not to intrude, but her presence brought a quiet warmth to the small apartment. They ate together in silence, broken only by occasional words or observations about the rain outside. The simplicity of the moment, the shared meal, the sound of raindrops, the quiet companionship felt profound. For the first time, she experienced a normal evening, free from the fear and running she had known for so long. After dinner, the rain began again, heavier now, announcing the arrival of another storm. She froze at the sound, her body tensing, and without thinking, he opened the blanket and gestured for her to sit closer. She hesitated, then obeyed, curling into the blanket while he rested a hand lightly on her back. She leaned against him, and for a while, neither spoke. The sound of her gentle breathing, the warmth of her small body, and the shared quiet created a sense of calm that neither of them had expected. The night continued with more rain. More distant thunder, but now the fox girl no longer seemed as afraid. She had someone to hold on to, someone to protect her when the storm felt overwhelming. And for the man, it was a revelation. He had entered this night expecting solitude, perhaps a quiet evening to watch the rain. Instead, he had become a refuge, a safe place, and in doing so, found a new depth of connection he had never known. By the time she finally fell asleep, curled gently against him on the couch, he understood something profound. Life was unpredictable, and sometimes storms brought more than fear, they brought new beginnings. Unexpected bonds and moments of fragile, yet powerful trust. He watched her sleep, listening to the rain and feeling the slow, steady rise and fall of her breathing. In that quiet moment, with the storm outside and the warmth between them, he knew that this night like no other would mark the start of something extraordinary for both of them. Days passed, and the city slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The fox girl had stayed with the man, and each day their bond grew quietly, almost imperceptibly, but undeniably. He watched her adjust to the apartment, observing small habits that made him smile and sometimes worry. She was careful with everything, as if moving too fast or touching the wrong thing might bring trouble. Yet even with her caution, she seemed to grow more comfortable. The way she explored the small spaces, ranging objects on shelves or peering out of windows, hinted at a cautious curiosity about the world she had never allowed herself before. Mornings were often quiet. She would sit by the window, watching the streets below, her golden eyes following passers-by, cars splashing through puddles, and the occasional stray cat seeking shelter. He would bring her tea or warm water, and they would sit together in silence, not needing to fill the room with words. These moments, though simple, were precious. She had a way of noticing details he would overlook: the pattern of raindrops, the sound of wind against the building, the small movements of birds on the windowsill. He found himself noticing them too, drawn into her way of seeing the world. Even though the storm had passed, she still reacted to clouds and distant thunder. At first, she flinched at every sound, tensing and hugging herself tightly. But over time, she began to anticipate the storm differently. She learned that the apartment was safe, that he would be there, and that she didn't have to face the storm alone. Whenever rain fell lightly, she would move closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder or sitting beside him, sometimes just holding his hand. The man realized that her trust was growing, and with it, a quiet bond began to take shape, one built on understanding, patience, and the simple comfort of shared presence. He learned more about her little quirks. She had an almost instinctive connection to nature, often pausing to listen to the rain or the wind. She liked to touch the plants, speaking to them softly, as if they could understand her. She would sometimes curl up in a chair or on the floor with a book, though she rarely read the words. Instead, she seemed to absorb the calm of the story, letting it sink into her like a soft blanket. These small habits fascinated him. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, yet her presence felt comforting and natural in the apartment. One evening, as the rain returned with gentle persistence, she moved to the couch and curled into the blanket he had given her. The man was sitting nearby, reading quietly, when a sudden clap of thunder shook the building. She froze immediately, hugging herself tighter and pressing her face into the blanket. Without thinking, he put down his book and gently reached out his hand, resting it lightly on her back. She leaned into him instinctively, and he could feel her shivering, not from cold alone, but from deep-seated fear. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered softly. "It's just rain. Nothing bad will happen here." Her golden eyes flicked to him, wide and trusting. She nodded slightly and slowly let her body relax, leaning closer until her head rested on his chest. Her breathing steadied as he kept a hand on her back, offering comfort without needing words. In that moment, he realized that this simple act, letting her rest on him during a storm, was becoming a routine. A silent promise that he would be there whenever fear returned. As nights like this repeated, they developed unspoken patterns. She would notice the clouds gathering outside, and he would prepare the blanket and settle her near him. She no longer needed to ask for comfort. It was understood. The man found himself waiting for these moments, feeling a sense of purpose he had never known. There was something profoundly moving about being needed, about being trusted by someone so fragile and cautious. And she, in turn, found safety and calm in his steady presence. Learning that not all humans were dangerous or frightening, their conversations grew slowly. She spoke quietly, sometimes hesitating, sometimes stopping mid-sentence. She asked questions about the apartment, about him, about ordinary things she had never taken for granted: a warm meal, a safe home, a quiet moment without fear. He answered patiently, always gentle, careful not to overwhelm her. The fox girl seemed fascinated by normal life, as if it were a treasure she had only glimpsed from afar. Her curiosity was quiet but persistent, and he found himself answering each question thoughtfully, enjoying the chance to share the simplicity of his world with someone so unfamiliar with it. Over time, he began to notice small expressions of her personality. She had a subtle sense of humor, often in tiny gestures rather than words. She would tilt her head when confused or make soft noises when something amused her. Her golden eyes would sparkle with curiosity, and sometimes when she felt safe enough, she would smile, small, hesitant smile that lit up her entire face. These moments were rare but precious, and he treasured each one, understanding how much courage it took for her to let herself experience joy, even during the day. When the apartment was quiet and the sun occasionally peeked through clouds, she would still seek his presence. Sometimes she would sit beside him while he worked or read, leaning lightly against his shoulder or resting her hand near his. She didn't need words. Her closeness was enough. The man began to feel a profound connection growing between them, a bond that went beyond simple friendship or hospitality. It was trust, comfort, and companionship. A quiet understanding that they were both learning to navigate a world that had been difficult for her alone. One afternoon, he noticed her staring out the window with a strange intensity. Clouds were gathering, dark and heavy, and he could see her small body tense with fear. She was almost frozen, as if caught between wanting to flee and needing comfort. Without hesitation, he moved to sit beside her and gently rested a hand on her back. She turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze, and then slowly leaned into him. Her breathing was quick at first, then gradually slowed as she pressed her head against his chest. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm right here. You don't have to be afraid." She stayed like that for a long time, letting the sound of his heartbeat calm her, letting the warmth of his presence ease the tension in her body. He realized that these moments had become essential, not just for her but for him too. There was something deeply moving about being needed in this way, about having someone rely on you for comfort and trust. And she, in turn, was learning that trust could exist, that not everyone would harm her, that a storm could be faced without fear if someone stood with her. Evenings became a time of quiet ritual. They would sit together on the couch, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, listening to the rain and simply being near each other. The fox girl's shyness slowly faded in the safety of the apartment, replaced by a cautious curiosity and a tentative sense of belonging. She would ask about ordinary things: a recipe, a favorite book, or a story from his life, and he would share patiently. Happy to see her engaging with the world around her, the man began to understand that her presence was not just about fear or seeking refuge, it was about connection. She had lived in isolation, moving from place to place, always hiding, always wary of others. But in this small apartment, with him, she could begin to experience something new: trust, safety, and the quiet comfort of companionship. And for him, it was equally profound. He had lived alone for years, content but lonely. Now he found purpose, joy, and a sense of meaning in caring for someone who needed him. Nights remained the most intimate part of their growing bond. Whenever a storm approached, she would instinctively move closer. Curling against him on the couch or leaning her head on his chest, he would keep a hand on her back, stroking gently, offering comfort without words. These moments, repeated with each storm, became a silent promise. He would protect her, she would trust him, and together, they would face whatever fear came their way. Through these days, the fox girl learned slowly, step by step, that the world was not always threatening. She discovered that someone could care for her without expecting anything in return, that safety was not an illusion, and that companionship could be gentle, patient, and consistent. And the man learned that trust was fragile, precious, and transformative. Each storm, each quiet moment, each shared glance deepened the bond between them, creating a connection that neither had expected but both cherished. By the end of part 3, the apartment was no longer just a place of shelter. It had become a small haven, a place of trust and quiet joy, where a lonely man and a frightened fox girl found comfort in each other. The bond they shared was subtle, unspoken, and yet undeniable. Rain, storms, and the unpredictable world outside had brought them together. And inside, they discovered something rare: safety, trust, the beginning of a relationship built on understanding and care. The days grew shorter, and the sky often carried the promise of rain. Even when it did not storm, clouds hung low over the city, casting a soft gray light through the apartment windows. The fox girl had begun to settle into the apartment, moving with a little more confidence each day. She learned the small routines of his life: where to find the kettle, how to handle the plants, and which books were safe to look at. Yet, beneath her cautious movements and small smiles, he sensed a lingering tension. Something about her past weighed heavily on her, though she rarely spoke of it. One evening, as a heavy storm rolled over the city, the fox girl was sitting on the couch, her knees drawn up and her arms wrapped around them. The rain beat relentlessly against the windows, and thunder rolled with sudden cracks, shaking the apartment. She flinched at each sound, her golden eyes wide with fear. The man, who had learned to anticipate these moments, placed a comforting hand on her back. She leaned into him instinctively, her small body pressing against his chest, as if seeking protection from the storm outside. "It's okay," he whispered softly. "I'm here. Nothing can hurt you while you're here." Her breathing was fast at first, and her ears twitched nervously. But slowly, she began to relax, letting his hand remain on her back, letting the warmth of his presence calm her. For a long time, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the apartment. The only movement was her small head resting on his chest, and his hand gently stroking her back. Finally, after several minutes of quiet, she lifted her head slightly and looked at him, her golden eyes glistening with unspoken thoughts. I think I should tell you something," she said in a small, hesitant voice. He looked at her gently, encouraging her without pushing. "You can tell me anything. I won't judge you. I just want to understand you." She hesitated, glancing toward the window at the storm outside. I've never really had a home," she whispered. "I've always had to hide. Because people didn't accept me when they saw what I was. I had to run whenever storms came. I thought if I stayed still, they would find me, or something bad would happen." The man listened carefully, his heart aching at her words. He could see the pain and fear she carried, a weight she had borne for years. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions yet. He knew she needed to speak in her own time, at her own pace. Her confession was a gift of trust, and he would honor it. "I don't know why I ended up here," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But last night, when the storm hit, I felt like I couldn't go anywhere else. I just came to your door. I didn't know what else to do." Her ears flattened slightly against her head, a sign of vulnerability he had come to recognize. The man felt a surge of compassion. "I'm glad you did," he said gently. "You were safe here. You are safe here." Her eyes searched his face, perhaps looking for a hint of doubt, or maybe expecting rejection. But all she saw was sincerity. Slowly, the tension in her body eased slightly, and she leaned back against him, though still close enough to feel his heartbeat. I've never really trusted anyone," she admitted. "Not like this. Not since I was little. But with you, it feels different. I don't know why, but I feel safe." The man smiled softly, understanding the gravity of her words. Trust was fragile, especially for someone who had spent most of her life in fear. And yet, here she was, confiding in him, resting against him, allowing herself to be vulnerable in a way she had never done before. It was a gift he didn't take lightly. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the apartment there was a quiet calm. The man spoke softly, asking gentle questions, allowing her to share memories in small, manageable pieces. She spoke of childhood nights hiding from thunderstorms, of people turning away from her when they saw her fox-like features, and of the loneliness that had followed her everywhere. She paused often, biting her lip or lowering her gaze, as if unsure she should continue. But he remained patient, offering warmth and understanding, making it clear that she could speak freely without fear of judgment. Hours passed, and the storm slowly eased. The fox girl's voice grew steadier as she recounted small details. Stories of hiding in alleys, moving from place to place, and the constant fear that had shaped her life. The man listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes gently offering a word of reassurance. Each story deepened his understanding of her world, a world that had been harsh and unkind, yet had produced a creature so gentle, cautious, and quietly resilient. I don't know if I'll ever stop being afraid of storms completely," she admitted finally, her head resting again on his chest. "But I think I can be brave when I'm with you. It's different somehow." He held her close, realizing that her small victories, trusting him, sharing her past, letting herself rest near him, were monumental. "You don't have to be brave alone," he said softly. "I'll be here whenever you need me." The bond between them deepened that night. It was no longer just about shelter or survival. It was about understanding, compassion, and a quiet companionship that neither had expected. She had revealed part of her past, and in doing so, had allowed herself to rely on someone completely. He had offered his presence, patience, and care. She had accepted it without hesitation. In the days that followed, their routine became slightly more predictable. She would still flinch at thunder and clouds, but she also began to take small steps outside during light rain, holding his hand when the fear grew too strong. She explored the apartment more freely, helped him with cooking and small tasks, and even began asking questions about his life, about the city, and about ordinary things she had never experienced fully before. The man noticed small changes in her demeanor. She smiled more often, though still shyly, and laughed quietly at little things, a bird outside the window, a playful comment he made, or the way the plant swayed in the wind. Her trust was growing steadily, and he understood that it was built on consistency, patience, and the simple fact that he never forced her to face the world before she was ready. One night, another storm arrived, heavier than usual. She sat on the couch, trembling slightly, her head resting on his chest as usual. But this time, instead of burying herself in fear, she whispered, I think I can handle this now. As long as you're here, I can be calm." The man held her a little tighter, realizing how far she had come. From a terrified, fleeing girl the night of the first storm, to someone who could begin to face fear with support, she had made enormous progress. And he, too, had changed. He had discovered a capacity for care, patience, an emotional connection that he hadn't realized existed within him. Through the storm, they stayed together, finding comfort in each other's presence. The fox girl's trust deepened, and with it, courage grew, not the kind that ignored fear, but the kind that allowed her to face it because she was not alone. And the man, watching over her, understood that protecting someone was not just about keeping them safe from the world, it was about being a constant, steady presence, someone they could rely on completely. By the end of part 4, the apartment was more than a refuge. It was a sanctuary, a place where two lives once solitary, once filled with fear and caution, had come together. The fox girl had begun to reveal her past, and in doing so, allowed a deep, trusting bond to form. The man had chosen to protect and care for her, not out of obligation, but because he understood the fragility of trust and the power of companionship. Outside, the storm eventually passed, leaving behind wet streets, fresh air, and the faint smell of rain. Inside, the fox girl rested, exhausted from the emotional release of sharing her past. And the man stayed close, a silent guardian and friend. They had faced fear together, and in doing so, had begun to discover something extraordinary. The quiet, transformative power of trust, care, and the courage that comes from not facing the storm alone. The days that followed felt different from any she had ever known. The fox girl had begun to settle fully into the apartment, no longer just a guest seeking refuge, but someone who felt for the first time that she belonged somewhere. The man had grown used to her presence in ways that surprised him. He noticed her small habits, the quiet way she moved around the apartment, and how she smiled when something pleased her. It was subtle, almost delicate, but he cherished it. Each smile, each gesture of comfort or curiosity, reminded him that their connection had grown far beyond a single night or a single storm. Even though the city continued with its usual rhythm, and storms came and went, the fox girl no longer flinched at clouds the way she once had. She had learned to trust the apartment as a safe haven, and the man as someone who would always be there for her. Rain had stopped being something purely terrifying. It was still loud, still powerful, but now it carried a new meaning. Rain could be shared moments, times to stay close, times to find warmth and comfort together. Mornings became moments of quiet ritual. She would sit by the window with a warm cup of tea, sometimes gazing at the city below, other times watching the clouds roll past. He would quietly prepare breakfast, occasionally talking about simple things, a book he was reading, a funny memory from his childhood, or the small adventures of his daily life. At first, she listened more than she spoke, her golden eyes absorbing the sounds and sights around her. But gradually, she began to respond, asking questions about the city, the people, or things she had never experienced before. Her curiosity was subtle, but persistent, and he found himself enjoying each small question, each attempt to understand the world that had always felt dangerous to her. One afternoon, the sky grew heavy again, threatening another storm. She noticed the change immediately and stiffened slightly, her body tensing as if preparing to flee. But this time, she didn't run. Instead, she moved closer to him, curling slightly against his chest on the couch, her ears flattening softly as she rested her head. He placed a hand on her back, stroking gently, offering comfort the way he always did. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered. "I'll be right here." Her golden eyes flicked up to his, and for a moment he saw a flicker of wonder, as if realizing that storms could be faced without panic. She nodded slightly and exhaled, leaning further into him. Slowly, she began to close her eyes, trusting him completely. For the first time, it felt like she was experiencing not just safety, but peace. As the storm raged outside, they sat together in silence. She listened to his heartbeat, the soft sound of his breathing, and the rhythmic tapping of rain against the window. In that quiet, shared space, there was no fear, no past trauma, only the present moment, calm and warm. The fox girl had discovered the extraordinary gift of someone who would never let her down, who would protect her without expecting anything in return. Even during storms, her habits became more natural. She would bring a blanket around her shoulders without prompting, pour herself a warm drink, or ask for a story while resting beside him. She no longer flinched at Thunder, but instead stayed close, drawing comfort from his steady presence. It was a subtle transformation, but profound. She was learning that the world could be safe when shared with someone trustworthy. Days turned into weeks, and their routines became a gentle rhythm of companionship. She helped with small chores, organized books, and tended the plants, all while becoming more confident in her movements and choices. He noticed the subtle ways she expressed joyous soft hum while watering the plants, a quiet laugh at a story he told, or the way her ears would twitch when something amused her. These small signs were reminders of how far she had come since the first stormy night. When fear had dominated every moment, evenings became moments of comfort and quiet reflection. She would sit on the couch, curled up against him, sometimes speaking in whispers, sometimes staying silent. The man would read or work nearby, occasionally glancing at her, feeling a profound sense of responsibility and connection. They shared little rituals, warming tea together, watching the rain, reading aloud, or simply sitting side by side. Each moment deepened the bond that had started with fear, trust, and the quiet act of letting someone rest on your chest. One night, after a particularly heavy storm, she rested her head against him as usual. The rain had soaked the streets and pounded the windows for hours, but inside, the apartment was warm and safe. She spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper, but full of meaning. I think I understand now," she said. "Storms, they aren't so scary anymore. Not when you're here." The man smiled, holding her a little tighter. "I'm glad," he said gently. "You've come a long way, and you don't have to face anything alone anymore." She lifted her head slightly, golden eyes shining with quiet gratitude. I feel like I finally have a home. And I think I've never really felt this safe before. Thank you. For everything," he reached out, brushing her damp hair gently from her face. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "I'm happy to have you here. You belong here. You're part of this life now." Her expression softened, and she rested her head back against him. The rain outside continued, but it was no longer a source of fear. It was a reminder of the journey they had shared, the nights of trembling and uncertainty, the quiet confessions, and the small steps of trust that had brought them to this moment. The apartment, once just a place to live, had become a sanctuary. Within its walls, fear had been replaced with safety, isolation with companionship, and uncertainty with trust. The fox girl had found someone who would always be there, no matter the storm. And the man had discovered the profound gift of caring for someone who relied on him completely. Time passed, and their bond grew stronger. Each storm, each quiet moment, and each shared laugh or smile reinforced the connection between them. She no longer flinched at Thunder. She no longer moved with hesitation. Instead, she had learned to face the world with a quiet courage, knowing that someone she trusted would always be there. Their life together settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings of tea and quiet observation, afternoons of small tasks and gentle conversation, evenings of reading and resting together, nights of storms and comfort, these moments became the foundation of a life they shared. The fox girl no longer felt alone, and the man no longer felt lonely. They had found in each other a sense of home, safety, and belonging. Even as the seasons changed and storms came and went, the pattern remained. Whenever rain fell, she would move to him, resting her head on his chest, and he would hold her, offering warmth and reassurance. It was a silent promise, repeated without words, that no matter what the world brought, they had each other. By the end of this journey, the fox girl had transformed from a frightened, wary figure into someone who could experience trust, safety, and peace. The man, too, had grown, discovering the depth of patience, care, and quiet love that came from protecting and understanding someone so delicate yet strong in her own way. Together, they had weathered storms, both literal and emotional, and had emerged stronger, closer, and more connected than either had imagined possible. And so, life continued, simple, warm, and full of quiet moments. The fox girl no longer feared the rain, for it had become a symbol of trust and comfort. The man no longer feared the unpredictability of life, for he had discovered the extraordinary bond that could grow when two lives chose to care for each other. In the apartment, as rain fell softly outside, she rested against him as she always did, breathing calmly, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. And for both of them, in that quiet, shared space, the world outside no longer mattered. There was only the present moment, only the bond they had built, and only the deep, unspoken knowledge that together they could face anything.